Okay, so the text that we're going to look at this time is called Spain. It's probably a little bit more of a difficult poem. It's certainly a longer poem, but some of the ideas that Auden's trying to express here, people have very differing and very varying sort of understandings of what he's trying to intend. So I'm going to go with my interpretation. I'll send you a few readings as well, and I guess you've got to try and make your own assessment as to exactly what he's trying to convey through this piece of poetry. So, first of all, the title, very simply, Spain is a European country, but the poem is focusing far more on the Spanish Civil War, which occurred from 1936 to 1939. And just in case you're not sure what a civil war is, it's a war within a country. So, this war was particularly between two different, sort of political agendas within Spain. And Auden himself actually went to Spain and he wanted to represent the Republican sort of view of the political side of this argument by becoming a basically a stretcher bearer or an ambulance sort of paramedic sort of support, and he was actually not able to do that, but he believed that he needed to live the history to understand it, to be able to write about it with some level of authority. So he actually did visit Spain and try and involve himself, and I feel like I'll be able to link that into what I think the point of the poem is, but not something I read from anywhere else. So it'll be my impression, and potentially other people would disagree with it. So it starts straight away with the idea of yesterday, all the past, and straight away Auden sort of collects all that together. That the past are the events that lead up to the Civil War, whether they're positive or negative, whether they're good or bad. Realistically, they are the things that precede the war itself. He uses the enjambment a lot in this particular poem. So you see like the punctuation in the middle of the line, and you'll see down here some semicolons and some commas that sort of split up the lines to sort of show that there's some confusion here within this poem that I don't think is necessarily in some of his other poems where he's a lot clearer on what he's trying to achieve. When we look at the initial thing about some of the past, and I won't go through the poem as deeply as some of the others, but he talks about trade routes, and that's a really positive thing where they sort of found a connection with different foreign nations, and that obviously increased their economy and produced an ability to be a greater country. So he's saying that that's a positive. Then he talks about the invention of cartwheels and clocks, the world of navigators. So we look at some things that Spain and the world itself, can be particularly proud of in terms of the leaps forward that we've made in the past. Okay, until we get to this point of the poem. Even the abolition of fairies and giants, and the fortress like a motionless eagle lying in the valley. We see things like fairies and giants. The abolition of that to me sort of senses that we're growing up as a world, as Spain as a nation. And similarly here, the fortress like a motionless eagle eye in the valley highlights the impossible becoming possible. It's ingenious, building a chapel in the forest, carving angels, these sort of things in the past, all about progress and development, and things that we can be inherently proud of. He does include some of the things that maybe we shouldn't be proud of, or maybe we should. You'd have to study this history to sort of make your own judgment. But the Spanish Inquisition of 1478, he talks about some of the events of that in this stanza here, the trial of heretics, and he makes no judgment on it. He just says that that's what happened, and that again that's part of the past. So obviously I guess the past can be the developments and the progress, but it also can be some of the negative things that have occurred. And there's a balance in that sort of argument that he makes here. We get to the end of this stanza, and we've got today the struggle. Okay, and we're going to see this but today the struggle, and regardless of the past. The struggle right now, the civil war and what's going on is the focus. So you see here, I've sort of written that there might be achievements from the past, but they're what brings us to this current civil conflict. So whether they're responsible is questionable, but certainly whatever events happened before a battle or a conflict, they had some sense of influence over them. So Auden doesn't make commentary on what they are and which ones are directly related to this struggle, but he says all of it really is a part of it. We get to this point in history where we have this conflict. some degree too, there's to me a little bit of a comment on like the natural aspects of the world. So a lot of the things that we're doing, like building a chapel in the forest, is somewhat artificial, and we're maybe interfering a little bit with the natural order of the world, and potentially there's a comment there from Auden that that's part of the reason why we get to a conflict sort of stage, that perhaps our leaders, our government have become too obsessed or too greedy in terms of what we can do, and haven't really thought about the consequences of some of those actions to the people. And this essentially, I guess, a civil war is, in some degree or in some relationship, the people are responsible for the civil war. They're the ones who sort of wage it and have an opinion, and they stand up for that opinion. So then again, we've got like, the dynamos, the turbines, the railways in the colonial desert. Again, that real interference with the natural order of the world, but certainly a human achievement, and certainly a progress for mankind. But again, the question is, have we interfered too much with the natural world? Then we get back to, but today the struggle, and there's a real emphasis that no matter what I was just saying, and all those commentaries about whether it was negative or positive, or whether we interfered too much, it doesn't matter, because we're here anyway. We're at this point of struggle, and that's what's really important here. So then we get to this stanza where the poet sort of starts to whisper. The waterfall sings, the crag by the leaning tower, sort of talks, oh my vision, oh send me the luck of the sailor. And there's this sort of reverence given to nature, and to the people who reflect and think, that they're the ones that are going to potentially make the changes. Sort of if we get back in touch with those ideas, that potentially we'll find the solution to the struggle that currently sort of exists. And then we've got the investigator, and we've got the idea of inquiry. I inquire, and it sort of suggests that we are inquisitive. We want to sort of develop and get better all the time. That's a part of human nature. It's a part of like what we are, and if we don't have that attitude, then probably we don't actually progress. So in some ways, I think Gordon sort of sees that as a positive. His commentary there is that. It's the inquisitive nature of humanity, or of humans, that actually do make us progress. But then we've got the other sort of side of things, people who have obviously sort of maybe trying to use this voice, but then we've still got the poor in their fireless lodgings. And to me, this is an exaggeration. We don't know 100% that if all poor people have no fire, but it does emphasize, the manner of which people are struggling, and potentially are cold. And this thing that they read in the evening paper, which is potentially maybe on the floor of their lodging, our day is our loss, sort of brings back that the conditions, maybe there needs to be conflict, maybe we need this sort of civil war to be able to move forward. And then when he says, "Oh, show us history, the operator, the organizer." So history is personified a couple of times in the poem. That history could guide us potentially, could tell us what to do, or will become the judgment of what we do. So like once we've made our actions in the present, they will quickly become history, and there will be a judgment attached to those. Time is the refreshing river, and the alliteration sort of says that time will see these things move from civil war to peace. But it's like, whilst we're in this conflict and this struggle, we can't be passive. We need to get involved, and not just wait for time to sort of let it go by. We need to get it right. So whatever the result of the civil war is, it needs to be the right one, in terms of moving forward. So then when we get to the second page, we've got, just make this a bit bigger. We've got a little bit of a different sort of focus here, because the nations are coming together. The shapes the individual belly and orders the private nocturnal terror. Did you not find the city state of the sponge? To me, it's like a bit of a commentary on countries and potentially us. Okay, again, like a few of his other poems, maybe being a little bit unaware, or not present enough in what is actually occurring. When we get down to life, if it answers at all, he again sort of says, Auden wants to question if life would take up the challenge, make things different, and that to me is a bit of a call to us. And I feel like in this section, there's a bit of a call to you. What are you going to do? Are you going to be the yes man, the bar companion, the easily duped, that accumulation of people who don't really have a voice and don't have a vision? Um, are you going to be this I am, this metaphor of I'm whatever you do, I am your vow to be good, your humorous story, I'm your business voice, I'm your marriage, I'm going to just be whatever, I'm your choice, your decision, I'm everything. That's one way of reading that sort of thing, that these people are subservient to whatever they're told to do. But then the other way is that they're going to be something. I am something. And whether they're on the side that Auden thinks is correct or they're on the other side, that as long as they're making a decision and they're making a little bit of a pact to do something, that then they're going to become Spain. And Spain's going to become whatever it needs to be. Now, this is obviously a very, very much my interpretation. To me, it's like that Spain's going to become the Spain that it is going to become because people show an interest and people, sort of essentially get involved in the civil war. And as a result of getting involved in the civil war, then Spain will become what it should become, which is, to me, then Spain becomes valuable. That Spain is something important enough to fight for. And just like any nation would be, so like obviously this is a very specific poem. There's no like general sort of commentary here in terms of not naming the places. He names them, but I think we get the idea that Spain is a metaphor itself for the world, okay, and that what they're doing here in Spain by standing up and sort of saying, no, this is my belief, this is what I think is right, that it's a representation of potentially what we should all be doing, even if it is that we don't agree with each other. That's how you create development and create change. Then we get into some sort of like quite natural sort of ideas about Spain, and then we get down to this pit here where it sort of talks about the arid square, the fragment nipped off from the hot Africa, soldered so crudely to inventive Europe that almost Spain doesn't belong in Europe. That it's sort of sort of detached from Africa, has more of the sort of Mediterranean African sort of weather. It's not like I would guess a lot of people would see Spain. I personally probably see Spain myself like this. That it's not like an essentially a European country. You'd link it more with sort of hotter sort of place, a different sort of weather pattern, and it's I guess in some ways again to me Auden might be saying Spain is different and Spain can be different, and that's okay, and they are being different here by taking up this battle. Then we get down to the idea that Madrid is the heart, and to me that this metaphor that Madrid is literally obviously where the fighting took place in the Civil War, but metaphorically that Madrid represents the battle for what you believe in. It's the heart of your beliefs, and obviously, again, like this is maybe both sides to me. Like there's moments of tenderness blossom. Hours of friendship into a people's army, that this is about the people standing up for what they believe in. Whether they're right or wrong, this isn't the point of the poem. The point is that they're standing up for their beliefs. And there's a tenderness in that, that they share this and that they work together to achieve that. When we go over the page, like I said, just flicking through the main points because obviously it's a pretty long poem, but you can look through this a little bit more closely, with some of the readings that I provided you. Then when we go on to tomorrow, perhaps the future, it's the first time we've sort of gone to the future. So we've looked at definitely yesterday, the past. We've looked at today, the struggle. But now for the first time, Auden sort of goes, well, tomorrow, perhaps the future. And he does it in a way that it looks like the today. He's got the hyphen in between to sort of, make that comparison. And then he starts to go on to the tomorrow. What would the tomorrow look like? And perhaps the future depends and demands a change in the moment. All right, this struggle that is existent is going to get us to the other point, to the tomorrow. And then when we look at it, there's a an enlarging of consciousness, by whatever means, a rediscovery of romantic love, photographing of romance, liberty's masterful shadow. the pageant master and the musician, the roar of the chorus, the exchanging of tips and the breeding of terriers, all these beautiful images that he projects towards us, because that's the promise that things can be better. But he immediately, at the end of this one, where he goes, the sudden forest of hands, goes back to, but today the struggle. So whatever's coming is going to come, but it's only going to become as a result of the struggle that people take up. And this struggle is one that I think Auden sort of feels compelled to write about, because, like I said, whether it's misguided or it's ethical and moral, he's not trying to make a judgment on that. He's trying to make a judgment on the fact that if people stand up for their beliefs and they join together towards a view of the way things should be, even if there's conflict, out of that conflict, the result will be that we will get a better future, a better tomorrow, because people have an opinion, they stand up and they do what they believe in. So then when we go back to after that struggle tomorrow for the young, the poets exploding like bombs. It's very interesting simile, where obviously Auden values the poets because he is a poet himself. But the idea that it'll be the voice of a critical thinker rather than the actual bombs and the actual war that will be the greatest voice in this new community. So yeah, we've got to go through maybe some battle sort of conflict, but hopefully that battle conflict, the result of that is that the poet's voice will become the bombs, that they will be the ones that start to manifest the future ideas that we come to. So maybe instead of having to go to civil war, the future might be that the poets can make commentary like bombs, and that can sort of create some substantial change. And then we get again straight into these sort of beautiful ideas of what the piece after the Civil War is going to be like. The walks by the lake, the bicycle races, the suburbs on summer evenings. So these beautiful images of what it is going to be like. But again, he goes back straight away to, but today it's the struggle. And to me, there's the repetition here is obviously, he obviously wants to emphasize it. But to me, it's like the conduit between the past, today, and the future. So the struggle that today is that conduit. It'll join the past with the future. And what the past seems to have been good, like he's positive about the past, even though there might be some negative things. The future seems like really promising, but right now it's not. But the challenge and the struggle in doing that is what's going to result in Spain getting back on to the course that it should be on. Then we've got this really interesting sort of stanza here that's probably a little bit confronting in terms of the ideas of the poem. We've got the idea of today, again in this struggle, the deliberate increase in the chances of death. There's going to be some people lose their life because of this. And in some ways, this is the most brutal Auden's been, because he's suggesting that you need to accept that chance of death if you want Spain to be better. So it's almost like he's supporting this civil war and saying that it essentially needs to happen if Spain's going to develop and improve. Then we've got this idea of the conscious acceptance of guilt, and this for me is like that, being conscious of the fact that things may be far from innocent, things may be far from moral and ethical, but the reality is that we need those decisions to be made consciously with intention and purpose, because to do so then means that you understand why you're doing them and what you're doing them for, and that the necessary murder, like a very confronting idea from Auden here, that this oxymoron that suggests that killing for purpose, in his opinion, I think would have been about destroying fascism. But again, he doesn't make that commentary. Okay, I'll put that in there, but realistically, he doesn't say that it's to destroy fascism. He doesn't support the side that he would probably tend to lean towards. He just says that there might be conflict, there might be people murdered, there might be people killed. He doesn't even say like that they'll get killed or they'll die. He says murder, which is intentionally killing someone. It's immoral, it's unethical. But he says it might be required. Actually, he doesn't really say it might be. He says it is required if there's going to be progress and development, and Spain's going to get through the struggle of the day to get to the tomorrow. And he believes that that's part of the process, and there needs to be an acceptance of that, which is probably somewhat contradictory to some of the other ideas. But I guess if that if those necessary murders are coming from a place of passion and critical thinking and belief and opinion, that in some ways Auden is going to support that. And then we get down to the final sort of stanzas, and we've got these like unusual images in the penultimate stanza: shared cigarette, candlelit barn, scraping concert, masculine jokes. They're not negative, but they're not positive images. So I guess too, like to me, there's again a bit of an idea that today, the fumbled and unsatisfactory embrace before hurting, that it's not going to be pleasant. That there's going to be some unpleasant elements to get to the other side, and even like in this side, the stars are dead, the animals will not look. We are left alone with our day, and the time is short. So hopefully, the time is short indicates that the struggle in the Civil War won't last very long. The temporary and short-term pain in the history of Spain as a nation, the 3 years of the Civil War are probably quite brief in their entire history when you look at it from that perspective, and you've got to look at it from that point of view when you're in the now. That whilst the temporary pain or the short sort of term pain is quite large, that it's going to create a much better future for Spain. Then the last two lines, history to the defeated may say alas, but cannot help nor pardon. So history is personified here, and he's going to speak to the defeated. Now, again, Auden doesn't make a judgment or a comment on who the defeated are, but he says history may say to the defeated, alas. And alas is like, you know what, these things happen sort of idea, but history will not be able to help or pardon the defeated. And that is war. That is history. History is written by the winner. So obviously the loser is going to be judged poorly in terms of the actions that they took. And to be, even though that is the reality, Auden says you should fight for what you believe in. Even if history will judge you badly, if you truly believe it, potentially that conflict needs to happen for you to get to the other side. To get that resolution in your country so that you can move forward together as one nation. Then when we look at it overall, essentially to me, the poem is just a call to arms for people to rise up for what you believe. And there's no judgment on what you believe. I personally don't believe that Auden has picked a side here. I know contextually he's on a side with the Republicans, but it doesn't appear to me throughout the poem that he uses his language to really strongly represent an idea that they're wrong and he's right. He's just saying, this is my sense of belief. There's people who believe that too. There's others who believe the other side, but this is why we fight. So it's an interesting premise because you wouldn't have sort of expected Auden to be like a supporter of conflict. But to me, I read this poem that way, that he's supportive of conflict if it's for the right reasons, and if there's a true integrity in the battle, that it's intrinsically what people believe, and they use that belief to fight for what they're passionate about, and that's a noble thing, if that's what they're doing, even if they win or they lose, or even if they're wrong or they're right. So that in essence to me is what he's trying to communicate, and obviously. This is really advocating for the people, okay, that the people need to stand up and become part of the political solution, by representing their ideas and not sort of sitting in the background.